Good morning from the library at your church. I have a confession to make. All the years that I've lived out here in San Antonio, Austin, and Texas, I have never read the great Western writer Louis L'Amour. So I'm sitting here in my jeans today because as a celebration, by next week I will have finished the 19th novel of Louis L'Amour on his books about the Sackett family. Now, the Sackett family came to the United States in the late 17th century, and they ended up settling in the hills of Tennessee and North Carolina out of Welsh, Irish, and Scott heritage. They're wonderful books about covering about 300 years of the Sackett family. The Sackett family history is of biblical proportions. They're a tough breed, and yet Louis L'Amour is able to breathe into the life and the ethic of the Sackett family. Social justice, removes bigotry from this family. But the Sackett family always ends up in a cycle. They'll go to peace, then conflict, and resolution. And how they get into most of the conflict is over their willingness to help somebody who is in crisis. They become advocates for someone who is being abused or being taken advantage of. They are indeed exciting books. And that's a lead into the 14th chapter of John, believe it or not. Louis L'Amour is, in a way, a lens through which we could understand what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about the advocate. In the 14th chapter, Jesus announced that he is going away. Now, the disciples have lived with Jesus for 3 years. In one sense, it's been a 3-year-long trail drive. Camping together, traveling together, all about what we call now the Holy Land. And the bonds they have developed are very strong, and now he tells them, I will leave. I suspect that they are shocked and they are feeling already a sense of loss. In this text this morning, he promises to send them an advocate which is the Spirit of truth. The English translations, to be honest with you, leave me somewhat confused. Advocate, Spirit of truth. What in the world does that mean? Is it another way of John's cryptic description of these things that are almost surreal. What is Jesus really saying? Well, the word advocate in Greek is paraclete. And a paraclete literally means one who stands beside another. Now that can be a legal term. An advocate is one who stands beside a person and defends their cause. Or it can be interpreted as one who stands beside someone in time of crisis and takes up their cause to defend them and to help them. Well, John says the advocate is the Spirit of truth. The Greek word for truth is aletheia, and it literally means not forgetting. It's a truth that we won't forget. So this Spirit reminds us of the truth that we have someone standing beside us who takes up our cause, like the seconds in Louis L'Amour's novels. Now, and Jesus adds something in this. The advocate and the Spirit of truth will be there for those who keep His commandments. And this command I give to you, Jesus says, that you love one another as I have loved you. You see, it's kind of a cycle. We will to keep that commandment, even though we cannot do it. So, there is one standing beside us who will not let us forget the Spirit of truth, that loving one another is the basic call of a Christian in life. That is our goal in life. It is the purpose. It is what God intended. Even from the Garden of Eden. Some call that the impossible possibility. It is impossible for us, but it is possible because of the one who stands next to us and even can live in us and change hearts of stone into hearts of flesh. Now, I want to say something about this book right here, this Bible. If you like fairy tales, if you are in love with the princess that kisses a frog and he turns into a prince, or the prince who comes to find Snow White in a coma and kisses her on the lips and they ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after. If you are thrilled with Pollyanna who falls from a tree and breaks her back and has a positive attitude, do not read this book. This book is about crisis, a cycle, peace, crisis, or resolution. The first humans are placed in a paradise, but for the life of them, they want more. And they reside east of Eden, and the world's changed. This book tells the story of a once free people that end up as slaves and are taken out of slavery, and yet they still want to go back and be slaves. This book tells of a kingdom that was founded upon the laws of God. A kingdom that did not last very long because they defied the laws of God. This book tells the story of a great deliverer who came to deliver people. And they ended up killing the deliverer. If we're able to stand back from the Bible and look at it as a whole, it is the Bible. It is a book that tells us about the good and then the evil, the crisis, and the attempt to deliver. It also tells us that in a way, God speaks during time of crisis. Oh, I think God is speaking all the time. It's just during crisis, perhaps we're better able to hear God. When the very foundations of the gods we have built up begin to crack and the idols we have begin to fall apart, the word of the Lord comes. When the walls of nationalism begin to erode and turn to rubble, the word of the Lord comes. When communities are torn by strife and suspicion and scapegoating, the word of the Lord comes. When King Uzziah, a good king, died, the word of the Lord came to Isaiah, and he saw the Lord high and lifted up. And we find ourselves in a time of crisis. It is indeed a time of confusion and chaos. And I am aware, as you are, that it is a complex time. And I see the spirit of truth, advocacy, standing beside. I see that happen in many people who put aside themselves to be able to help those who are suffering at this time. I see that as the Spirit of truth, the Spirit that dwells in them. I also see the spirit of self-centeredness. Those who would take everything they can from the grocery stores and hoard it. Those who are using this time through computer scams, internet scams, those who jack up prices and gouge the consumer. I also see this is a time in which it seems to polarize us, or either bring forth with clarity the polarity we already have in this country. I find it deplorable to use this virus as a political football, whether you are on one side or another. We hear the squabbling of, well, it is our personal right versus the rights of the many. I don't know what the answers are, but I have a feeling this is the time to hear the word of the Lord, that the Spirit of truth will remind us we have one who stands beside us if we want to follow and willfully want to follow, love one another as Christ has loved us. It is the advocate of the Spirit of truth that not only stands beside us, but is willing to enter in to us. I will say this biblically. The idea of quarantine is as old as the Old Testament. The people who were sick were put outside of the camp because the needs of those many, certainly was at stake. But I will also say this, that this Jesus of Nazareth stood beside those who were often shunned and quarantined by their illness, because of their illness. For he was always stopping to help the leper. The disciples are saying, we got to get the kingdom going. But you're always stopping to heal a lame man. Jesus, we have to get the kingdom going. But there you go again, healing a blind man. Cleansing a leper. At this rate, we'll never get the kingdom going. This is the kingdom. I guess for us during this time, and how we respond to one another. How we respond to one another in community. How we respond to one another as a nation, as a world. Should be the question. What is the most loving, compassionate thing we can do? The old Sackett family always talked about someone who would stand on principle as having sand. Later on, that would become understood as someone having true grit. This week to come, may God bless you and yours. Stay in touch with one another. If you get an impulse to call somebody, do it. You might not ever know that the Spirit of truth is telling you to do so. Have a good week.